They made me scrub the floors as guests arrived for my anniversary party. You're lucky we let you stay, his mother whispered, stepping over me in heels I once owned. I stayed silent, smiling as I served dessert. By the time the candles were blown out, their smiles had faded. They just didn't know I planned every bite of this night. This spot right here is still dirty. Do you see it, Courtney? Right where everyone will walk in. I was already on my hands and knees, scrubbing our marble entryway floor when the first guest's car pulled into the driveway. Not just any ordinary evening. My 5th wedding anniversary party. A celebration I wasn't allowed to attend as a guest in my own home. Margaret, my mother-in-law, hovered above me, pointing her manicured finger at an invisible smudge while wearing my Jimmy Choo heels. The ones that had mysteriously disappeared from my closet last month. The crystal chandelier light caught the diamond on her finger as she gestured downward, her shadow falling across my back like a physical weight. They'll be here any second, she hissed. Hurry up. The doorbell chimed as I frantically scrubbed at nothing. My knees burned against the hard floor, my back ached, and a thin layer of sweat made the black service dress cling uncomfortably to my skin. 5 years ago, I'd been Courtney Baker, marketing executive with an MBA from Northwestern. Now I was on all fours at my own anniversary party. Courtney, are you still in bed? The caterers arrive at 9. Margaret didn't wait for an answer before barging in. Trevor's side of the bed was empty. He hadn't come home last night. I sat up, forcing a pleasant smile. Good morning, Margaret. I was just about to save it. She dropped a plastic caddy of cleaning supplies onto the duvet. The entryway marble needs attention. There are water spots on all the crystal glasses. And for heaven's sake, do something with your hair before people arrive. My hand instinctively reached up to smooth my sleep-tousled brown waves. I'd once been told they were my best feature. Back when compliments were still part of my daily existence. I thought maybe I'd wear the blue dress tonight, I ventured cautiously. Since it's our anniversary celebration. Margaret's eyebrow arched so high it nearly disappeared into her salon-fresh bangs. That's sweet, dear. But we need someone to help serve. The blue dress would be. She looked me up and down with thinly veiled contempt. Impractical. Translation: you're the help, not a guest. Know your place. I clutched the cleaning caddy and nodded, watching as she crossed to my closet and flung open the doors. Her manicured fingers pushed aside the few nice pieces I still owned, landing on a plain black sheath dress I'd worn to a funeral last year. This will do. Understated. Appropriate. She pulled it out and laid it across the foot of the bed. Oh, and I've asked Melissa to do the seating arrangements. She has such a good eye for these things. Melissa? Trevor's executive assistant. The woman whose perfume now regularly clung to my husband's shirts. The woman whose text messages lit up his phone at all hours. I swallowed hard. I already did the seating chart last week. Margaret waved her hand dismissively. Yes, well, some of Trevor's business associates confirmed late yesterday. Melissa knows who needs to sit where. She glanced at her diamond-encrusted watch. I need to get my hair done. The floors, Courtney. Don't forget the floors. After she left, I sat motionless on the edge of the bed. 5 years ago, I'd been Courtney Baker, marketing executive with an MBA from Northwestern. Now I was, what? The inconvenient wife. The domestic help. The embarrassment to be hidden away during important social functions. I picked up the plastic cleaning caddy. Inside was a scrub brush that had seen better days, generic cleaning spray and a roll of paper towels. The irony wasn't lost on me. For my anniversary gift, I received cleaning supplies and orders. By noon, I was on my hands and knees in the entryway of our, Trevor's, colonial-style home. The marble floors gleamed under the chandelier light as I worked methodically from the grand front door toward the center of the foyer. My knees ached, and the smell of lemon cleaner had given me a dull headache. The caterers worked around me, casting sympathetic glances when they thought I wasn't looking. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, quietly placed a glass of water next to me when Margaret wasn't watching. At 3 o'clock, Trevor finally appeared. He strode through the front door in his tailored suit, stepping carefully around the wet spot I'd just scrubbed. His eyes flicked over me briefly, registering my presence with the same attention he might give to a piece of furniture. "Where's your mother?" he asked, not bothering with a greeting. "Supervising the flower arrangements in the garden. I replied, sitting back on my heels. Happy anniversary, Trevor. He checked his watch. Right. Yes. Happy anniversary. His phone buzzed and his expression softened as he read the incoming message. I need to make a call. Let Mother know I'm home. He stepped around me, his polished leather shoes narrowly missing my fingers. Not once did he offer to help me up or ask why his wife was on her knees scrubbing floors on their anniversary. I watched him go, a strange calm settling over me. In my pocket was a small USB drive containing every piece of evidence I'd spent the last year collecting. Emails, bank statements, photos, recorded conversations. A digital record of every lie, every betrayal, every humiliation. By 6, guests began to arrive. I'd barely had time to shower and change into the funeral dress before the first expensive cars pulled into the circular driveway. Margaret had insisted I continue touching up the entryway floor until the last possible moment, ensuring maximum visibility of my degradation. I was back on my knees, scrub brush in hand, when the first guests walked through the door. Margaret greeted them effusively while I remained invisible just 3 feet away. Barbara. John. How wonderful to see you, she gushed, air-kissing both cheeks. Trevor is in the garden. Let me show you the way. As they moved past me, I kept my head down, focusing on a non-existent spot on the already immaculate marble. More guests arrived and more footsteps walked around me, careful not to acknowledge the woman scrubbing the floor at her own anniversary party. Then came the moment that crystallized everything. Margaret returned to the foyer with Trevor's business partner and his wife. I was still on my knees, now rubbing uselessly at the floor. Don't mind her, Margaret said with a dismissive wave in my direction. Courtney's just finishing up. I looked up then, making brief eye contact with Margaret. Something in my gaze must have unsettled her because she quickly looked away. She took a deliberate step toward me, her heel, my former Jimmy Choo that had mysteriously disappeared from my closet last month, landing inches from my hand. Leaning down slightly, she whispered, "You're lucky we still let you stay," before continuing her hostess duties. 5 years of accumulated rage threatened to explode in that moment. But I thought of the USB drive in my pocket, of the projector I'd personally set up in the dining room earlier that day, disguised as part of the anniversary tribute to our marriage, of the carefully timed slideshow set to begin during dessert. I stood slowly, brushed off my knees, and carried the cleaning supplies to the kitchen. In the staff bathroom, I changed into the serving uniform Margaret had left out for me, a black skirt and white blouse that might as well have been labeled invisible. Looking in the mirror, I straightened my shoulders and practiced my smile. Not the real one I'd lost years ago, but the serene, knowing smile of someone with a secret. Tonight, I would serve drinks, pass hors d'oeuvres, and endure one final evening of humiliation. But by the time they blew out the candles on that anniversary cake, everything would change. They just didn't know I had planned every bite of this night. Margaret floated to the door, transformed instantly from drill sergeant to gracious hostess. I remained on my knees, invisible, as she welcomed the Andersons, Trevor's most important clients. Her voice dripped with honey as she ushered them past me, carefully steering their attention away from the woman scrubbing the floor. "Such a lovely evening for a celebration," she cooed, her hand brushing across the pearl necklace at her throat. The same necklace I'd seen in a donation receipt from her children's charity foundation last month. That necklace was the first thread that started to unravel everything. It had been a Tuesday in March when I discovered it. Working late at the Callahan financial offices, I was filing quarterly reports for Margaret's pet project, the Callahan Children's Future Foundation. She'd started it 3 years ago, supposedly to build orphanages in developing countries. The photos of smiling children adorned our office walls, and her fundraising galas raised hundreds of thousands from Boston's elite. I'd been organizing donation receipts when I noticed something odd. A $12,000 item from Bergdorf's categorized as administrative expenses. Curiosity made me dig deeper. The receipt showed a South Sea pearl necklace with diamond clasp. 2 weeks later, Margaret wore it to a company dinner. One receipt became 2, then 10. A Hermes handbag labeled as office supplies. Christian Louboutin heels filed under travel expenses. A weekend spa retreat disguised as a planning session. I created a separate folder on my personal laptop, scanning every suspicious transaction. By June, I documented over $200,000 in misappropriated funds. Money donated for children that had instead funded Margaret's wardrobe and lifestyle. The Andersons disappeared into the living room and I moved to a new section of floor, continuing my pointless scrubbing. My knees throbbed, but beneath the pain burned something stronger: purpose. In the pocket of my apron lay a small black USB drive containing every transaction, every fraud, every lie. Trevor appeared at the top of the stairs, looking annoyingly handsome in his tailored suit. His eyes slid past me as if I were part of the furniture. The invisible wife, the inconvenient accessory he'd acquired before his career took off. He hadn't always been this way. During our first year of marriage, we'd been partners. I'd helped build his client portfolio, stayed up late strategizing, celebrated each success. Then his mother moved to town after his father died and everything changed. I became less in my own home with each passing month. My opinions discounted, my presence minimized. The lipstick stain was what finally opened my eyes. A smudge of coral red on his white collar, a shade I'd never worn. I found it doing laundry after one of his late meetings 6 months ago. When confronted, he dismissed it as marker from a presentation board. I might have believed him if I hadn't found the receipt in his jacket the next day. Dinner for 2 at Maison Laurent, the most romantic restaurant in the city. The receipt was time-stamped 10:30 p.m., with an elegant looping signature: Melissa Weber, his executive assistant. From that moment I began paying closer attention. Melissa's texts coming through at midnight. Lunch meetings that stretched to 3 hours. Hotel charges on the company card when he claimed to be at conferences. The affair hurt, but the conspiracy was worse. It was during one of my late nights at the office that I discovered the emails. Trevor had forgotten to log out of his computer, and a message from Melissa caught my eye. "What are we going to do about Courtney?" I shouldn't have read more. But I did. "She's becoming a liability to the company image," Trevor had written. "Mother says we need someone more polished, more connected for the expansion plans." Melissa's response: "The board meeting next month is perfect timing. We can announce the restructuring and her position elimination together. She'll never know it was planned." They were going to fire me from the company I'd helped build, the one thing I still had that was mine. The realization struck like physical pain. I wasn't just unwanted as a wife. I was being systematically erased. That night changed everything. No more tears, no more hoping things would improve. Instead, I became methodical. I forwarded the email chain to my personal account. I began taking photos with my phone. Melissa entering Trevor's office late at night, the door locking behind her. Margaret wearing jewelry purchased with foundation money. Board documents showing plans for my department restructuring. I became invisible in a different way, watching, recording, collecting. The evidence accumulated on my laptop, then transferred to the USB drive I now carried everywhere. The weight of it in my pocket felt like power. The doorbell rang again. More guests arrived as I continued my performance of the dutiful wife. Or rather, the dutiful servant. By 7 o'clock, the house was filled with Boston's elite, all here to celebrate a marriage that existed only for show. I rose finally from the floor, my knees stiff and aching. In the kitchen, I exchanged my cleaning supplies for a serving tray of champagne flutes. The catering manager gave me a quizzical look. "Aren't you Mrs. Callahan?" she whispered as I arranged glasses on the tray. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just helping out." Her eyes held confusion, then pity. I'd seen that look before. The silent question of why I allowed myself to be treated this way. She didn't understand that sometimes you need to bend completely before you can stand up straight again. I moved through the crowd, offering champagne while collecting snippets of conversation. Margaret was by the fireplace, showing off architectural plans for the next orphanage to potential donors. Trevor stood in a corner with Melissa, their bodies angled toward each other in the intimate way of lovers who think they're being discreet. His hand brushed hers as she passed him a folder. "The final numbers look excellent," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Then softer, "You look beautiful tonight." I moved past them, invisible as always. Neither suspected I'd recorded similar exchanges for months, building a catalog of their betrayal. Neither knew how many photos I had of their accidental touches, their after-hours meetings, their weekend business trips to the Cape. The USB drive pressed against my hip as I served the last of the champagne. In 3 hours, when dessert was served, everything would change. The projector in the dining room, ostensibly set up for a romantic slideshow of our 5 years together, contained a very different presentation. Margaret caught my eye from across the room and gestured impatiently toward a spilled drink. I nodded and headed toward the kitchen for a cloth, my steps lighter than they'd been in months. Let them think me broken. Let them believe they've won. By midnight, they would understand exactly who they'd underestimated. I returned from the kitchen with a crisp white cloth and knelt to clean the spilled champagne. No one moved aside to make room. I simply worked around their designer shoes, invisible again. As I stood, Margaret appeared at my elbow, her fingers digging into my arm with surprising strength for a woman her age. "The caterers need help with dinner service," she hissed, her smile never faltering for the benefit of nearby guests. "And for heaven's sake, stand up straight. You're representing the Callahan name, even if you are just serving. Just serving. At my own anniversary party." I straightened my spine and followed her into the kitchen, where staff in pressed black uniforms prepared the first course. The head caterer glanced between Margaret and me, confused. "Mrs. Callahan, we have sufficient staff for service," she began, but Margaret cut her off. "Courtney is happy to help, aren't you, dear?" She turned to me, her eyes hard despite her smile. "Show them how we serve wine at Callahan events. The Richardson method, remember?" There was no Richardson method. It was just another opportunity to humiliate me in front of strangers. I nodded and took the wine tray, aware of the pitying glances from the catering staff. One young server mouthed sorry when Margaret turned away. I moved through the dining room with practiced efficiency, pouring Bordeaux into crystal glasses. Each guest received a perfectly measured amount, served from the right. Years of attending charity galas as a guest had taught me proper service etiquette, something Margaret knew well. Now I used those same skills as unwilling staff. Senator Davis stopped mid-sentence as I approached his glass. "Courtney, aren't you?" "It's Jim. Trevor's wife," I said with a practiced smile. "Just helping tonight. The '09 Chateau Margaux is exceptional." His brow furrowed in confusion, but his wife quickly steered the conversation elsewhere, embarrassed for me. I continued around the table, counting each pour. 12 guests. 24 minutes until the first course. 144 minutes until dessert. Every moment had been timed meticulously in my head. The USB drive pressed against my hip with each step, a constant reminder of what was to come. I'd rehearsed this evening for weeks, calculating each movement, each second. Trevor sat at the head of the table, Melissa positioned conveniently to his right, a seat that should have been mine. Margaret had arranged the seating chart to place me at the opposite end, but of course I wasn't even sitting at the table now. Trevor caught my eye as I poured his wine, his gaze holding mine for a fraction longer than usual. "Thank you," he said automatically, then turned back to Melissa. 2 words. The first he'd spoken directly to me all evening. I watched as his hand found the small of Melissa's back, lingering there a moment too long to be professional. She leaned slightly into his touch, her lips curving into a smile meant only for him. I moved to the next glass, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. Mr. Edwards, Trevor's largest client, looked up at me with alcohol-brightened eyes. "You know, I've never understood why you don't join these dinners anymore, Courtney. You always had such insightful things to say about market strategies." Before I could respond, Margaret materialized beside me, her hand closing over mine on the wine bottle. "Courtney prefers to help behind the scenes these days," she said smoothly. "Don't you, dear? She's found her real talents lie in support roles." The deliberate pause made her meaning clear to everyone at the table. I was no longer considered an equal, no longer worthy of a seat among them. A few uncomfortable glances were exchanged, but no one challenged her. "Speaking of support," Margaret continued, using my momentary silence to advantage, "let me show everyone how to properly pour wine at a formal dinner. Courtney still hasn't quite mastered it." She took the bottle from my hand and demonstrated an elaborate pouring ritual of her own invention, complete with an unnecessary flourish of the wrist. "You see, the label must always face the guest and the pour should end with this gentle twist. It's a small detail, but it's these traditions that separate proper entertaining from common gatherings." The implied criticism hung in the air. I stood silently beside her, my face a careful mask of attentiveness. Inside I was counting down. 136 minutes until dessert. "How you try," Margaret instructed, handing the bottle back to me with the smug smile of a teacher correcting a slow student. I performed her ridiculous pour perfectly, adding the pretentious wrist flourish at the end. The senator's wife received her wine with a tight smile. "Acceptable," Margaret pronounced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Keep practicing." She returned to her seat while I continued serving, feeling every pair of eyes on me. Some held pity, others discomfort, a few barely concealed amusement. No one spoke up. No one questioned why the co-founder of Callahan Financial's marketing division was serving wine instead of discussing business strategies. The first course arrived: seared scallops with microgreens. I retreated to the kitchen ostensibly to help with plating but really to check the time. 122 minutes remaining. In the kitchen's relative privacy, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. The catering manager approached, concern evident in her expression. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Callahan? We really don't need additional service help." I straightened my shoulders and adjusted my apron. "Everything is proceeding exactly as it should." She seemed unconvinced but nodded and returned to her staff. I used the moment alone to verify the USB drive was secure in my pocket. The weight of it reassured me. A small device containing enough truth to destroy carefully constructed lies. When I returned to the dining room with the second wine selection, the conversation had turned to Margaret's foundation. She was describing the newest orphanage project with animated gestures, her hands showcasing the diamond tennis bracelet purchased with donation funds earmarked for clean water systems. "We've raised nearly $500,000 for the new building," she announced. "The architect's renderings are simply breathtaking." I poured wine for Mr. Pierce, who served on the foundation's board. His wife beamed at Margaret. "Your dedication to those poor children is inspiring, Margaret. I don't know how you find the time to manage it all." "It's my life's purpose," Margaret replied with practiced humility. "To know I'm making a difference for children who have nothing." The bracelet on her wrist caught the light as she raised her glass in a mock toast. $42,000 that would never build classrooms or buy medicine. I'd seen the invoice buried in the foundation's quarterly reports, categorized as consulting fees. Trevor's hand found Melissa's knee under the table as I approached to serve them. He didn't bother moving it, confident in my continued silence, my continued submission. 97 minutes until dessert. "The anniversary cake is magnificent," Melissa said to the table at large. "I selected it myself from Duchamp's. Wait until you all see it." She selected our anniversary cake. The final indignity might have broken me months ago. Now it only strengthened my resolve. I circled the table with mechanical precision, the practiced smile never leaving my face. Inside I was transforming, from invisible to inevitable. From victim to vindicator. The main course arrived, perfectly seared beef Wellington, Margaret's favorite for important guests. I helped serve each plate, then stood back against the wall, watching the performance of my marriage from the outside. Trevor proposing a toast to 5 wonderful years. Guests raising glasses to our future together. 53 minutes until dessert. The cake Melissa had selected. The projector I had programmed. The truth no one expected. My smile deepened, genuine for the first time that evening. Let them eat cake. They had no idea what I was about to serve. Now for the moment we've all been waiting for. Margaret's voice carried across the dining room as the dinner plates were cleared. The anniversary cake. The double doors to the kitchen swung open, and 2 servers emerged carrying an elaborate 3-tiered masterpiece. White fondant cascaded in perfect folds, adorned with sugar flowers that must have taken hours to craft. Gold leaf accented the edges, excessive, showy, just like the Callahans themselves. 5 years, Trevor announced, his arm now draped casually around Melissa's chair. Who would have thought? The undercurrent in his tone wasn't lost on me. Who would have thought I'd still be here after 5 years? Who would have thought he'd still be trapped in this marriage? The cake was positioned at the center of the table and champagne flutes were distributed for a toast. I noticed mine was conspicuously absent, so I took one from the tray myself. The server glanced at Margaret, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod of permission. Trevor stood raising his glass. To 5 years with Courtney, and to many successful years ahead for Callahan Financial. The emphasis wasn't subtle. The business mattered, the marriage was an afterthought. Guests murmured appropriate congratulations, Glasses clinked and cameras flashed. A perfect moment for their perfect image. Margaret produced a silver cake knife, ornately engraved with the Callahan family crest. "Courtney dear, come cut your anniversary cake." My heart pounded against my ribs as I moved forward. This was the moment I'd planned for, timed down to the second. I took the knife, feeling its weight in my palm. 5 years of accumulated rage and humiliation crystallized into perfect clarity. "Before we cut the cake," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I'd like to say a few words." Confusion flickered across Margaret's face. This wasn't part of her script. Trevor frowned, setting down his champagne. "Courtney, perhaps now isn't." "I insist," I said, still smiling. "It is my anniversary too, after all." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, the invisible wife suddenly visible. I raised my glass, the champagne catching the light. "To Trevor," I began, my voice carrying easily in the hushed room. "My husband of 5 years. Relief flashed across faces around the table. Just a harmless toast after all. "Trevor, your secretary says you're more romantic inside the office. Especially on your desk at midnight. And in the conference room after hours." The silence turned razor sharp. Trevor's face drained of color. Melissa froze mid-sip, champagne threatening to spill from her lipstick-stained glass. "To Margaret," I continued before anyone could recover. "My mother-in-law who welcomed me so warmly into the family." Margaret's eyes narrowed, her hand clutching her pearl necklace. "Margaret, your loan officer called again. He's concerned about those unauthorized foundation transfers. And to all of you, thank you for your generous charity donations. The orphanage you built never existed. But the applause was real, wasn't it?" The senator choked on his champagne. Mr. Pierce, the foundation board member, slowly set down his glass, his expression morphing from confusion to dawning horror. "What exactly are you implying?" Margaret's voice had lost its honey-sweet tone, replaced by a dangerous edge. I smiled, a real smile this time. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. And I brought receipts." With deliberate calm, I walked to the wall and flipped a small switch. The lights dimmed automatically and the projector I'd set up earlier hummed to life. A blue glow illuminated the shocked faces around the dining table as the screen descended from the ceiling. "I prepared a special anniversary presentation," I explained, extracting the USB drive from my apron pocket. "A look back at our 5 years together." Trevor half rose from his chair. "Courtney, that's enough." "No, Trevor. For once, it isn't enough." I plugged the drive into the projector's port. "For once, it's just the beginning." The first image appeared on screen. A receipt from Maison Laurent showing dinner for two, timestamped 10:30 p.m. on a night Trevor had claimed to be at a business conference. Melissa's looping signature was clearly visible at the bottom. "Your alibi needs work," I commented as the image changed to security camera footage from the office, showing Trevor and Melissa entering his private office late at night, his hand inappropriately low on her back. Gasps rippled around the table. Mr. Edwards' wife covered her mouth with her napkin. The Richardsons exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Courtney, turn that off immediately," Margaret hissed, her face flushed with anger. "I'm just getting started," I replied, clicking to the next slide. Foundation bank statements appeared, showing transfers to Margaret's personal accounts. Then invoices for luxury items. The pearl necklace she currently wore, the diamond bracelet on her wrist, spa weekends and shopping sprees, all categorized as orphanage expenses or administrative costs. "The children send their regards," I said softly as the evidence mounted on screen. "All 0 of them, since the orphanage only exists in your fundraising brochures." Margaret lunged for her purse, probably reaching for her phone to call security, but it was too late. The damage was done. The Pierces were already standing, making hurried excuses to leave. Senator Davis looked physically ill as he recognized his own substantial donations listed among the misappropriated funds. The next slide made Trevor grip the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Emails between him and Melissa detailing their plan to remove me from the company. "Restructuring is such a clinical term for betrayal," I observed as their own words condemned them. "You had no right to access private communications," Trevor growled, finally finding his voice. "Like you had no right to plot against your wife? Your business partner." I countered. The person who helped build your client list when you couldn't get appointments on your own? The final images appeared in rapid succession. Margaret wearing jewelry purchased with charity funds. Trevor and Melissa emerging from a hotel elevator. Bank statements showing the systematic draining of foundation accounts. Board documents revealing plans for my elimination from the company. By the time the screen went dark, half the guests had already fled, muttering excuses and avoiding eye contact. Those who remained sat in stunned silence, champagne forgotten, the elaborate cake untouched in the center of the table. The overhead lights came back on automatically. I stood at the head of the table, champagne glass still in hand. "Happy anniversary to us," I said quietly, setting down my untouched champagne. Trevor's face had transformed from shock to fury. "You've just destroyed years of work, relationships we've built." "No, Trevor. You did that. I just provided the evidence." Margaret was already on her phone, her voice low and urgent as she presumably called her lawyer. Melissa had disappeared entirely, her chair empty beside Trevor. I picked up the silver cake knife again, its weight somehow lighter now. With steady hands, I cut into the perfect white facade of the anniversary cake, revealing the blood-red velvet interior. "Would anyone like a slice?" I asked the remaining guests. "I've been told it's to die for." No one moved. No one spoke. The perfect Callahan image had shattered, leaving only the truth in its wake. I served myself a small piece on a china dessert plate, the one Margaret had imported from France specifically for tonight. The cake was indeed exquisite, rich, sweet, and deeply satisfying. "The thing about serving others," I said, taking another bite, "is that eventually you learn exactly what they deserve." Senator Davis cleared his throat awkwardly. We should be going." The remaining guests seized the opportunity to escape, chairs scraping against hardwood as they hurried to leave the scene of social execution. Within minutes, only the three of us remained, Trevor, Margaret, and me. "You'll regret this," Margaret seethed, her composure finally broken. "When we're through with you." "You'll what?" I interrupted, setting down my fork. "Sue me for telling the truth? Call the police and explain why you diverted charity funds to buy that necklace?" "Please go ahead." Trevor stood, straightening his tie in a futile attempt to regain control. "This isn't over." I smiled, savoring my last bite of cake. "You're right about that. The SEC will have questions about the foundation. The donors will want their money back. The board members might be interested in those emails. But for me..." I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate and stood. "It's completely over." I walked away from the table, from the remnants of my 5-year mistake, from the people who had tried to erase me. Behind me, I heard Margaret's choked sob and Trevor's angry phone call, already trying to contain the damage. But some messes can't be cleaned up. Some truths once served can never be taken back. And some revenge is as sweet as anniversary cake. I didn't look back as I exited the dining room. The sounds of Margaret's frantic phone calls and Trevor's angry denials faded with each step I took toward the front door. 5 years of my life in this house, and I felt nothing as I walked away from it. My 10-year-old Honda waited in the service driveway, exactly where Margaret had insisted I park it, so it wouldn't be an eyesore for the guests. I'd packed a single suitcase that morning and hidden it in the trunk. One small bag containing everything I truly cared about. My grandmother's quilt, photo albums from before Trevor, my Northwestern diploma, and a few cherished books. The night air felt clean against my skin as I slipped off the black service dress and changed into jeans and a sweater I'd stashed in the car. The simple act of removing that uniform felt like shedding a suffocating second skin. I started the engine and pulled away from the Callahan estate, the headlights illuminating a path forward into darkness. I'd booked a room at the Brookside Motel on the edge of town, the kind of place the Callahans would never think to look. As I checked in, the desk clerk glanced curiously at my single bag and wedding ring, which I was still wearing out of habit. I slipped it off and dropped it into my pocket. The room was basic but clean. A double bed with a faded floral comforter, a small desk, and a bathroom with thin towels. It was nothing like the luxurious master suite I'd left behind, with its Italian marble and Egyptian cotton. Yet as I sat on the edge of the bed, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I slept soundly for the first time in months, without anxiety dreams or middle-of-the-night panic. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the thin curtains. I checked my phone to find 17 missed calls, 12 from Trevor, 5 from Margaret. I deleted them without listening to the voicemails. Instead, I called James Peterson, a lawyer I'd consulted in secret 2 months earlier. He answered on the second ring. "It's done," I told him. "You can deliver the papers this morning." "Are you sure you don't want to wait a few days?" he asked. "Give the dust time to settle?" "No. I want them on his desk today." My voice was steady, certain. "And James? Make sure you're there in person. I want you to see his face." After showering, I drove to a small cafe across town where no one would recognize me. The morning news played on a television mounted in the corner. I wasn't expecting to see Trevor's face on the screen so soon, but there he was, looking considerably less polished than usual as reporters shouted questions about foundation irregularities. I sipped my coffee and watched with detached interest as the anchor explained that multiple donors to the Callahan Children's Future Foundation had come forward overnight with concerns about misappropriated funds. The camera cut to Senator Davis, his statement measured but damning. "If these allegations prove true, it represents a profound betrayal of public trust." My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Papers delivered." He didn't take it well. I smiled into my coffee cup, imagining Trevor's face when confronted with divorce documents outlining his infidelity and business misconduct in explicit detail. The prenuptial agreement his mother had insisted upon would work against him now. My lawyer had found 3 separate violations that rendered it void. But I wasn't after their money. The papers specifically stated I wanted nothing from the Callahan estate. Not the house, not alimony, not even my rightful share of the company. All I requested was my personal possessions and my maiden name back. Courtney Baker. The woman I'd been before. By afternoon, the story had exploded across local media. I watched from the anonymity of a bookstore cafe as Margaret's face appeared on the screen, her expression tight with fury as she pushed past reporters outside the Callahan financial offices. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Foundation board members resign amid fraud allegations." My phone rang again, Melissa this time. I answered out of curiosity. "What do you want?" My voice was calm, almost friendly. "Courtney, please." She sounded like she'd been crying. "You have to tell them I didn't know about the foundation money. I had nothing to do with that part. But you did have something to do with the plan to push me out of the company. And with my husband, of course." Her breath hitched. "They're saying I could be implicated in the financial fraud. I could lose my license." "That sounds like a personal problem, Melissa." "Please," she begged. "I have student loans. I can't afford legal troubles." I considered her request for a moment. "Send me the emails from Trevor where he first suggested the affair. All of them. And the complete plan for removing me from the company." "Why would you?" "Insurance." I cut her off. "Send them by 5 and I'll tell Peterson you were manipulated. After 5 you're on your own." I ended the call and returned to my tea, feeling neither victory nor vindication, just a strange, peaceful clarity. By 5:15 Melissa's email arrived with all the evidence I'd requested. I forwarded it to James without reading it further. Some chapters didn't need revisiting. 3 days later I signed a lease on a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom with good natural light and a small balcony where I could place the herb garden I'd always wanted but Margaret had deemed too rustic for the Callahan image. The landlord didn't ask questions about my sudden need for housing or why I paid 3 months' rent upfront in cash. I bought second-hand furniture from a local thrift shop, pieces chosen for comfort rather than status. A slightly worn leather armchair. A oak dining table with character marks from previous owners. Mismatched bookshelves that I filled with the books I'd been collecting in secret for years. For the first time since my marriage, my surroundings reflected my actual tastes rather than the Callahan aesthetic. The news coverage continued throughout the week. Major donors were demanding refunds. The state attorney general had opened an investigation into the foundation. Callahan Financial's stock dropped 15 points in 2 days as clients pulled their investments. Trevor's carefully cultivated business relationships crumbled as former friends and associates distanced themselves from the scandal. I watched it all unfold from a distance, feeling detached from the chaos I'd unleashed. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. About truth finally having its moment. A week after the anniversary party, I registered for fall classes at Boston University's business school. The program director raised an eyebrow when she saw my application. Courtney Callahan? Aren't you? Baker, I corrected gently. Courtney Baker. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Well, Ms. Baker, with your experience and recommendations, I think you'll be an excellent addition to our entrepreneurship program. I found work at a small marketing firm owned by a woman who'd once interviewed for a position at Callahan Financial. She remembered how I'd treated her with respect when Margaret had been dismissive. I always wondered why someone like you stayed with them, she said as she offered me a senior consultant position. I didn't explain that sometimes you have to lose yourself completely before you can find your way back. Some journeys aren't easily understood from the outside. 1 month after my anniversary party, I visited the Attorney General's office to provide formal testimony about the Foundation's financial irregularities. The evidence I'd collected resulted in criminal charges against Margaret and a complete dissolution of the charity. Trevor avoided prosecution only by agreeing to repay all misappropriated funds, a financial blow that forced him to sell the house and liquidate his personal assets. I didn't attend any of the hearings or follow the media coverage. I was too busy rebuilding my life. A simpler life but authentically mine. On quiet evenings I sometimes sat on my small balcony with a glass of wine. Not the expensive Bordeaux the Callahans served, but a local blend I genuinely enjoyed. Below, the city hummed with activity, people coming and going, living their honest lives. I'd watch them and feel a sense of connection I'd never experienced in the isolated grandeur of the Callahan estate. They'd taken everything from me, my career, my confidence, my identity. But in losing those things I'd gained something far more valuable. Myself. The divorce was finalized exactly 3 months after our anniversary. I marked the occasion by donating my wedding ring to a women's shelter. The shelter director asked if I wanted a tax receipt for the donation. No, I said, smiling as I placed the platinum band in her palm. I already have everything I need. If this story of sweet revenge had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Courtney served that anniversary cake after exposing all their lies with actual receipts. What was your favorite moment? Was it Margaret stepping over Courtney in stolen heels? Trevor's face when the projector revealed his affair? Or Melissa's empty chair after she disappeared during the big reveal? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.